那 Chris start 应该。
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, for those who have not met me before, my name is Shingai, and I'm currently a master's student at Binghamton University's System Science program. I come from a background in the social sciences. I did my bachelor's at USC, where I got a interdisciplinary degree in the social sciences with an emphasis on psychology. Spent my entire career in the world of crypto and blockchain, and gradually became obsessed with systems to the point where I decided that I should take a master's degree in that subject. So Jason has talked about tools that could be useful for the Oxford Project and the Club of Remy, and really making systems and cybernetics concepts applicable to people in a real way. And I think that a software tool that I am working on might be relevant or interesting for the group and its goals. So I'm going to give a quick presentation. And this is my first time presenting the tool to an audience. So I'm a bit nervous and also excited to get all the
Oh no,
feedback.
relax.
Relax, relax. We're easy going here.
Here is the most friendly club that you can find all over the world. So,
Okay,
Even
thank
Elon
you.
Musk is acceptable here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I will get started. Okay, I do have screen sharing. Da, da, da. I will share desktop. Okay, let's see. Okay, can
yes,
everyone
here.
see my slides?
Yeah, we see your whole screen now.
Ah, full screen. Okay. So what I want to do, I want to go, oh, 1 second. Share. Here we go. Okay.
Yeah,
That should just be the slides. Okay, wonderful.
BERT.
Okay, great. So this is an introduction to BERT, which is short for the Bounded Entity Reasoning Toolkit. And the name BERT is a nod to Ludwig von Bertalanffy, founder of general systems theory. The reason why I'm doing this is because really from the beginning, as soon as I learned about system science, my question has been, how do I do system science? All the theories, all the principles, all the ideas sounded amazing, but I feel like what I was promised at the beginning was this idea that I would be able to use these concepts to go into any scientific discipline and study any system using general systems concepts. And I found it really difficult to find anyone that actually showed me how to do that in practice. So the person who really has inspired me to go deeper into system science and whose textbooks have been really useful for me is George Mobis, former president of the ISSS. And he has written a pair of textbooks on system science, the most recent one being System Science Theory, Analysis, Modeling, and Design. And in this book, he outlines a very ambitious concept of advanced software tools for doing what he calls deep systems analysis. And as I was reading about it, I felt very strongly that it would be cool to actually have these tools in existence and not just ideas in a textbook. And George is not working on implementing it. He's basically moved on to other research interests and has put this out into the public, hoping that someone else will take up the mantle. So my objective is to take these ideas and put them into software prototypes where they can be discussed in real time, in practice, rather than just talking about the ideas in the textbook. And I'm just very curious and passionate about this topic. So a bit about what BERT is. It is first and foremost a tool to facilitate the process of systems analysis. In its current stage, it is very much a proof of concept, and it is a testing ground for this general theory of systemness proposed by George. So at the core of his theory is the idea that any system at any scale, from cells up to societies, can be usefully described as interactions between matter, energy, knowledge, and information. And in his framework, he associates matter with compositionality, so the composition of the system. He associates knowledge with organization. He associates energy with dynamics, and he associates information with communication. The knowledge piece has been very controversial. He chooses to define knowledge as the inverse of Shannon information, which I find to be useful on the one hand, but it also raises a lot of eyebrows. So plenty of questions about the extent to which that is accurate or realistic, et cetera, et cetera.
Bingo.
So, yes.
Could you repeat again the definition of knowledge from Mobus's viewpoint?
Yeah. So it's right here. I
Critical.
hope you can see it actually, but it's essentially the inverse of Shannon information. So
Oh, okay.
Shannon information is here, and knowledge is just defined as the inverse of Shannon information.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, please, any other questions that come up, feel free to stop me. So that's what BERT is. What it isn't is it is not very user-friendly. This initial proof of concept was really designed just like help me get a feel for, oh, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. You can go back
Yeah.
to the previous slide.
Yes, please. Yeah.
The way I see knowledge is actually a discretized form of information. See, it's breaking information into both a continuous stream of information in time domain, and this one our T is frequency, which is discrete. So if you take the information break it down into discrete form and a continuous form, you get this. Because what I'm saying is there is nothing continuous, everything is discrete. But when you don't have the resolution to see the discreteness, you just lump it all together into something called a continuous entity and describe it by a state variable as opposed to discrete parameters here. So I put these two things together into one bucket called information and make it a triangle. But it's essentially doing the same thing. And then the rest of it, this is what I was really excited about. This book, the figure 2.5 is very much the first slide that I presented in my presentation. So thank you for bringing this up. This is very nice. Thank you.
Amazing. Yes. Also, it's a little bit hard to hear you. I was able to make out what you were saying, but your voice was a bit muffled. But I think
same thing happened last. No, just one more time. And this is key point. I just want to repeat it. I'm very sorry. What I was saying is, the way it is postulated here, information is when you represent it in time domain, it becomes like a continuous entity. Whereas if you take the inverse of time, which is frequency, that makes it a discrete entity. Okay. So he is breaking information into two different domains, sort of time and space. But there is no need to do that. Both of them are just intervals. What I'm saying is everything is discrete. Okay. If you have the resolution to see the discreteness, you see the discreteness. But when you lack the resolution, the observer or observing instrument doesn't have the resolving power, then you just lump it all together as one homogeneous entity, call it a continuous system. So information can go from quantum to cosmic level here, right? So there is no need to separate this out, and you can make it a triangle, matter, energy, and information. This is where the cybernetics starts, right? Information is neither matter nor energy, but whether it is discrete or continuous, beauty lies in the eyes of the resolving power of the beholder.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, that's great. I would love to see how you approach that in your work.
Yeah,
that makes sense
this
to
is
me.
what I said in my presentation, and I'll send you the YouTube link. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So what BERT is not, it's not very user-friendly. This initial proof of concept was really just a starting point. So there's a bit of a learning curve for people who want to use the software, although it is freely available. And it is not a tool for dynamic modeling and simulation yet. So Jason had asked me to talk about the differences between this approach and systems dynamics. And it's interesting because George spent a lot of time using systems dynamics, mostly in the mid-late 90s, maybe early 2000s, building models of energy systems and solar panels. And his experience is that he found it to be limited in that it did not account for all of the aspects of systemness that he felt to be important. So this tool is really designed to guide you through a methodology of deep systems analysis. And the idea is that you should really analyze the real world system and capture as much information as possible about both the system structure and the relationships between the parts in a recursive fashion before you even attempt to generate a dynamic model or a simulation. So a heavy emphasis on a rigorous process of analysis and capturing information. And the methodology that he's devised is grounded in his formal ontology of systems, which is derived from his systems principles. And it's a interesting blend of George Clear's mathematical systems theory, which informs the rigorous design of a database, but also Peter Checklin's soft systems methodology, so that you can account for the complexity and the messiness found in human and social systems. So I think one thing that's novel about this approach is that the organizational aspects of systems and notions of boundary are enforced by this mathematical structure that is deeply ingrained and informed by systems theory and systems science. And the systems knowledge base is grounded in a formal set and graph theoretic definition of system. So basically what BERT is doing is facilitating this blue circle here, number one, analysis, and making it easy for a user to follow the process of analysis. And then this gets stored in a knowledge base, which is currently being prototyped. And then from that knowledge base, you start generating a variety of different models and simulations, such as agent-based models, systems dynamic models, graph or network models, et cetera, et cetera. Then you monitor the results to see the extent to which the models and simulations correspond with reality. You create designs if you're trying to engineer a system. You have some governance process which oversees this entire system of analysis, and then the whole process repeats, or at least that's how George envisions it in his book. And a bit more about this theory of systemness and the underlying theoretical frameworks. So, and I can share resources on this, but essentially George argues that any system can be usefully defined according to this mathematical formalism, which is grounded in set theory and graph theory. He makes a conscious decision to not use category theory because he feels that set and graph theory are much more accessible, although category theory he feels probably has utility. So any system can be defined as a set of components, which is this C variable, a set of interactions, or a graph rather, of interactions between those components. These are internal interactions between the system. This G variable represents external interactions. So it's a graph of interactions between the system and its environment. You have a boundary, which is currently defined as a set of interfaces and a set of properties that are associated with those interfaces, such as porosity or fuzziness. You have T, which is a set of transformation functions. So you have the inputs to the system, you have the outputs to the system, and if you measure them over time, then you will be able to derive a set of transformation functions which describe mathematically how inputs are transformed into outputs. You have this H variable, which is a state object, essentially the system's memory. And then for any system at various levels, you will have a time interval, a delta, that is relevant for the level of analysis that you're operating at. So any system can be recursively analyzed using this framework. And he identifies stopping conditions for this process of recursive decomposition. So he theorizes that eventually you get to a point where it's either no longer possible or no longer useful to decompose. And you run up against these things like combining and splitting and buffering and impeding, that could serve as a signal that you can stop decomposing. I'll stop there. Any questions?
Yeah, I have one
Yeah.
question right on this
Yeah.
slide. You talked about set theoretic view and a graph theoretic view and about the category. I don't understand what you describe by the category view. Can you explain, please?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, it's okay. Have you read about category theory at all, or not at all?
May not be by name.
Okay, interesting.
Answer is explicitly no.
Yeah, great. No, it's something I'm really just learning about. So category theory, as I understand it, is a branch of mathematics that was developed in the 1950s-ish, and it's highly abstract in that its sole purpose or its main purpose was really to facilitate communication across branches of mathematics. So if you want to go from calculus to statistics, to set theory, to graph theory, and to like anything else, then category theory is this sort of form of mathematical logic and formal math that is abstract enough such that you can transfer proofs and concepts between all branches of mathematics. Yeah.
What is the category?
What is a category? So the direct answer is that I do not know category theory well enough to define it.
Okay.
It's similar to a graph, is the feeling that I get, where like you can define a graph as a set of nodes and edges. You can define a category as a similar sort of like formal structure. They use diagrams and arrows. I'm curious if anyone else here has background in category theory that can jump in, because I'm not an expert at all.
If no one else has an answer, I just want to say something. Have
Yeah.
you read about bond graph theory? Bond graph theory is at every node, you define both sort of like input and output. You say that I neither know, for example, if you're modeling an electrical circuit, you have two variables, right? Current and voltage. So when you go to every node, usually people assume that they know one thing and they calculate the other. But in a bond graph theory, you let both of them float. And that's exactly what happens in, for example, in the brain neuron. The current is set up by the biochemistry, which opens the receptor and changes the conductance. Actually, rate of change of conductance multiplied by charge is also equivalent to current. So the current floats. And then similarly, the amount of charges that can flow through and accumulate also changes, and the amount of charge total is the voltage. So you neither know current nor voltage. Otherwise, you know exactly how to solve the problem. So that is where the bond graph theory comes in. You have to model both of them. That is both the internal state and the parameter that you're modeling. And I was just wondering whether that is what he meant by category theory.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have this thinking when you tell us the elements of this S equals CNGBT, blah blah. This CNGBT letter stands here for me is sorry, looks like a category as well. Because you see, first you say C is the content, right?
The components, a set of components.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Set.
immediately you invoke a question. I don't know if you can further detail that. Because if you compare this idea with the system dynamics is sort of simpler than this. It's just ask you to narrow down two types of variables. The level variable that you can measure. I mean, you can take a photo and tell us how much like the water level is currently at. So that's one type. And another category he called it rate variable. So it's the change rate. So you cannot take a picture of something as a rate, but you can calculate it when you involve time, and then he got interval times, and he threw in something called parameters, constants, and then started a computer simulation of how the system behaves. Now, when we're working on that kind of modeling methodology, what we really encountered is there's a lot of components or content that the model cannot capture. For example, people's mental status, and specifically in China, there's a very specific phenomena called the top has a policy, the bottom has a strategy, which means the top means the authorities, and the authorities, they had a 5-year plan, and they implemented some direction. Now, the bottom people, they will not just obey that directive. They will develop strategies to go around it. So there's a gaming behavior inside the system that the system dynamics cannot capture. So that was the interesting thing we went into I think many years ago. So now that's why I'm interested in how your model can do better than that one. And perhaps you can go back to components, relations, interactions, and unfold them one by one to see how you can exactly capture, get the things in your hand.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few options. I could actually switch over quickly to the textbook because he does break down this equation into mini equations. So essentially this C component in and of itself is an equation defined using set theory. And then the same for all the other letters. So I could try to walk through that. I could just try maybe like talk through a real world example and how they would like map, like outside of the math. What do you think would be most useful in this moment?
Yeah, example is better, I think.
Example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Example is better.
Okay, great. Yeah. So let's take the Club of Remy as a system. Some of the components we could identify would be Shingai, Jason, Jerry, and everyone else. So these would be a set of like identifiable components, human components. We also might identify the website as a component. I don't know if there's a nonprofit or an LLC, but that structure could be, one of the components. So these are the types of components we would identify, and we would capture it into our knowledge base. And then we would look for interactions between these components. So messages between all of the members would be a form of interaction that is internal. Whereas if the Club of Remy creates a publication that is going out into the outside world, that could be a form of message that is an interaction with the outside world. And even in terms of interaction types, it could be emails, it could be phone calls, it could be text messages. Basically, anything that we can directly observe and measure about a system can be put into these boxes. And I think it does get to your point, Jason, about with a lot of systems, there are limits to what we can directly observe. So when I think about the mental states of someone in China, or even in the United States living under the government, my mind goes in two directions. Number one is this is where agent-based modeling comes in, where we use ABMs perhaps to represent the state of an agent in an abstract way. But I also think about rapid advances in neuroscience and EEG technology. And 15 years from now, maybe we do live in a world where we have widespread access to people's mental states for better or for worse. Yeah, that's where my mind goes.
How about the T and the H?
Right. Okay. So the T is a set of transformation functions. So for Club of Remy, let's imagine that there is a just being theoretical, there's some donations flowing in or some profit coming in because we have developed some service. So there's an inflow of money. And then on the output side, there could be the creation of new products. And so over time, if we have inflows of money or new members, we could measure those. And then on the other side, we could have output of new projects or new research papers, and there would be some sort of mathematical relationship between those that we would observe over time. Yeah,
H.
right. Yes, H. Okay, H is system memory. So this is acknowledged as one of the sort of fuzzier aspects that requires further research. And it's part of why I decided to focus my initial research on blockchains, because the blockchain itself is a very rich memory object. But for the Club of Remy, we could look at all of the email records, all of the Zoom meetings, basically the history of all conversations and all interactions.
Or YouTube channels.
YouTube channel, exactly. Yeah, and if there's a way to extract that information and structure it for analysis, then I think it becomes a sort of useful memory object. But absolutely in human organizations, especially if they aren't keeping rigorous records in a well-structured manner, this notion of state and memory is one that is really interesting and will vary from system to system. I'm curious for you, Ram, what comes up in terms of the brain.
I
Yeah.
was going to no, I was going to say, it's not really the raw data, right? It is not the emails and other things. It is actually the meaning derived by reading the email. But the meaning itself cannot be explicit. It needs to be stored in the form of sensation, action, or cognition and thought. That is what I was getting at. It should be stored as some kind of association between something coming in, something going out, and which could be reciprocal by itself.
Yeah.
So it is a database of reflexes, not raw data.
Interesting.
Right? Is the memory is that's how I think of memory. I don't know how you put it into your system. I don't know.
Yeah, no, this is great. My perspective on this work has been heavily informed by my specific system of interest. So again, I am working with this blockchain as a data object that it's a file that just holds every single transaction that has ever occurred dating back to 2009. And it's, no meaning is really assigned to it, I suppose.
Wait. Are you storing you have to have a data structure to put into your database. So the transaction is stored as a data structure. And the meaning is implicit in the data structure. So even in the brain, there is no place any meaning is ever understood anywhere.
Right.
It is all the question of who is the sender, who is the receiver. If you store the pair, then the meaning is implied. That's what you have, I presume, right? What do you store in your transaction?
What is stored in the transaction is information about a sender, a receiver, and then amount transferred, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I was getting at. That is the implied meaning. Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's see. Jason, does that help with the equation?
So this equation we can consider is an expansion of George Clear's simplest S equals set of elements. Set of elements and set of relations. And then here you further distinguish the relations into external, internal, and you highlighted the boundary, the necessary of the boundary. Uh, President Trump is focusing on the boundary of United States. So if boundary is gone, then the United States is gone. So boundary highlight is important too. Now, my curiosity goes to how do you actually write your knowledge base? I mean, how do you put this? This currently is a kind of abstract directions, right? And how do you put it into computer as a model and can deliver as a tool? How do you exactly do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, we have a graphical user interface where a user puts in information about the system and it is stored as a JSON object. That's what we did for the initial prototype. The next phase is to develop an XML specification, and that will interface with some form of graph knowledge base. So current prototype is user interacts with a GUI and you have a JSON model. And I can show you an example of what that JSON model looks like. But the JSON model is based directly on this equation.
I don't understand the term JSON model. Could you explain what that means?
Sure. Yes. A JSON. Actually, I'm just gonna show because I have it open really quickly. Yeah. It's yeah. It's a computer language and notation for storing models in a standardized format. So if I stop this and then share. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a JSON file for my Bitcoin model. So these
So JSON. It's not JSON, but JSON.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, JSON. Yeah. So let's see. Jerry, would you like me to say a bit about how this is structured, or was it helpful to just
Yeah, the print is so fine, I can't really read it from my screen.
Okay, can I zoom in a little bit? Does that help?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So these identifiers on the left are the placeholders that inform you of the generic structure, and then on the right is where you put in the variables.
So implicitly includes the note in terms of the information content.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's nominalistic in character, that everything is given a name first.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, everything you do has to fit into this box.
Is also identified with some,
Sorry, yeah.
Is also identified with the identity. And the identity in this context is what?
Let's see. Are you referring to this ID variable?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So the environment as one of the sort of core system elements that's defined in the framework has an ID of E1. So it's just an identifier for this environment component.
So it starts then with an external representation. The situation in terms of situated logics, you're first declaring the environment on which the information will be related to.
That is mostly true. It could be useful for me to switch over to the graphical user interface at this stage.
No, please don't. Please don't.
Okay. Okay. Yep.
I want to understand what is going into the database.
Okay. So the process of analysis does start with analyzing the interactions between the system and its environment. Step number one is identify the system's primary output and identify who is receiving that output. And then you proceed to identify other relevant outputs and then other relevant inputs. So the framework does, on many levels, start with how does the system relate to its environment? And that is a precursor to going inside of the system.
What does level equals -1 mean?
Level -1 is an indicator of which level of the hierarchy you are operating at in the system. So environment relates to system of interest as level -1, and then system of interest is essentially level 0. And then once you go inside of the system, you get to levels 1, 2, 3, 4 as you go deeper and deeper.
So as I understand this, then from the moment that you have within this a set of concentric objects that are hierarchically organized into such that the identity will give you the level of a particular one of the concentric objects. By concentric here, I mean closure over the language within that level. Is that what you're talking about? Or you're not looking at it from this level? Description.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I fully understand your question. Could you, maybe rephrase it? Yeah.
Sure. Let me give an example. So if I was to start, say I wanted to classify DNA.
Yeah.
All right. I would have at some level, upper level, the environment on which the organism lived in.
You would. You would, yeah. If you were looking at a specific strand of DNA, you absolutely would.
Well, I would only look at double-stranded DNAs in an organism.
Double-stranded DNA, okay. But you'd be looking at DNA in the context of a specific organism, correct?
Well, I'm going to have to, if I give a description of the DNA, well, that is its sequence, then it will describe a particular organism. So I don't have much flexibility there.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm wondering if my lack of background in the natural sciences might be a bit of an issue. I'm imagining that I have a frog in my lab, and that frog has DNA, and so I'm thinking about a specific double strand of DNA in a frog, and so the frog is the environment for the DNA. But is that off?
That's the general notion of how the cybernetics involved with DNA.
Okay.
So but yes. But here I think Shingai is playing the role of a system analysis, and he is defining the system in front of him. So I think he assigned where is the level of -1, where is the level 0. And if this is done by not Shingai but a bigger group, then the group needs to discuss to get a consensus to finally write this thing down. Am I correct?
Yes, correct, 100%.
That's exactly how I'm interpreting it, Jason. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. Absolutely. It's absolutely emphasized the subjective aspect of analysis. And when you're working in a group, there's a need to reach some consensus about all these things. It is not a pure science in which things can be, defined in an absolute manner. There's choices to be made about how we define levels of analysis and boundaries and environments.
So let me continue then.
Please.
So that in this context, the information under the environment, under information, you would then have both the nature of the organism, the name of the organism, and the something about the niche in which it survives, which furnishes the information that's going to be used as input.
That is correct. You might put that under the description tag here, but yes, that is correct.
No, you need a classifier. You need a classifier.
For niche specifically.
Well, if you're going to do the database and if you're actually going to make an entry.
Right. Yeah.
We are at the environmental stage. The sources are species.
Oh,
we can't hear you.
Can't hear you, Ram.
Which is the difference.
Can't hear you.
Environment and the system. when you talk about a species, are you talking about the system and the environment is what is the species part of? The environment is a catch-all bucket, right?
Yes. So environments are actually defined as sets of sources and sinks in this framework. So you are sort of encouraged to identify specific systems external to the system of interest.
External to the system of interest. That's what I'm saying. So if you're talking one day and you're talking about a frog, the frog is the system under study. But the frog lives in a pond that with predators and its source of food and other disease-causing things and all the other environmental.
Exactly.
So here in the description, frog will not be part of this. The observed system is at a level 0, whereas the environment is the level -1. Correct?
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This is what I'm calling as open system.
Yes.
The open system has one system under study in the middle, and then it could be just interacting with one other system, or it could be interacting with the whole environment around it.
Yes.
And so that is the difference between an open system and a closed system. In the open system, then the matter, energy, and information can flow between the system and the environment, and there are no boundaries. There is no equilibrium. There is only flow.
Yeah.
That's what you're modeling, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, yes.
The model. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm curious, did you say there are no boundaries?
No boundaries.
No boundaries. Interesting.
Well, no. I take it back. Sorry.
Yeah.
The system under study has a boundary. It has to have. Otherwise, it is not a confined system. But what happens inside the system under study is not really relevant to the environment. What the system sends out as information, matter, energy to the environment is the only thing the environment cares. And similarly, what is happening if there is some of the creature that's going to eat the frog, whether that what is the state of that creature, or the internal description of that creature is immaterial. All you know is it's going to eat me or not.
Yeah.
So that is what I'm saying, the difference.
Yes. Agreed.
One thing you dig deep inside, that is the closed system. The rest is all just things that flow in and out of the system of the study.
Yeah.
Is that, do I understand it right? Correctly? Is that
you do. Yes. It's spot on. And I think for me, I don't know, have you read much Bertalanffy, Ludwig von Bertalanffy? Are you very familiar with his work? Okay. Yes.
That is why I changed my title and my talk to General Systems Theory.
Exactly.
The system is open system, and most people don't really get it. They don't differentiate between the system under study versus the external stuff.
Right.
One of them, you need to get to the
Ram, you're very muffled.
Again, I don't know what's happening. I'll take out my headphones. Sorry.
It's very difficult to hear you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now you're muted.
Sorry?
You were muted.
That sounds better, much better.
Yes.
If I take it out and put it back, it comes on. I don't know, something wrong. Maybe I should put it later. Okay. No, but one other question I wanted to ask, it's kind of sort of related to what Jerry was saying. When you're talking about things inside, they are not necessarily concentric circles. There could be actually concurrent operating circles. There is a big difference between the two. Concurrent means they are all independent, simultaneously acting. Whereas concentric makes it like things are going in and out of something. Concentric defines a boundary, whereas concurrent is not.
Rem, I agree with you completely, but I needed a simple way to express what needed to be said. I agree with you completely. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. On open systems. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm still trying to understand the relationship between cybernetics and the JSON data elements.
Okay.
Are you going to, somehow you have to get to how these data elements would commute, shall we say, into a cybernetic system. How would you relate these various terms? As I understand it at the moment, this would be dependent on the description given, would somehow be the source of the cybernetic actions you're anticipating.
Yes, you show us after you finish all the description, what happened? Do you hit a run button and it produces you something, or what? I mean,
that would be the end goal. And I mean, I am again wondering if I should switch over to the graphical user interface, but essentially part of the methodology that you follow when analyzing the system is to identify every possible interaction between the system and its environment, but also between the various components of the system. And so as you identify and map out various flows, then the notion of circular feedback loops is built in. It's a result of the analysis because you are looking for and capturing information about flows of information and matter and energy between the parts.
Your screen currently is still at the early top part. Show us something in between, like how the relationship is represented.
Yeah, good idea.
Interactions.
Thank you. Yes. So this is boundary interfaces. If we go inside, I'm still operating at the boundary level. Interfaces, equivalents, sources. Okay, here we go. So here we have an interaction popping up. It's actually not very intuitive for me to be operating straight from the JSON model, but here we have an interaction that is associated with one of our system elements. And so it has an ID associated with it, which is a flow. There is a name of the flow. There is a description of the flow. Flows are identified or categorized into various types, such as information, energy, and matter. And then you have the source, the interface, and the sink associated with that interaction, along with units and measurable parameters. So there are several of these interaction aspects scattered throughout this file.
I see. So this is actually one system dynamics equation here. You have a source, you have a sink, you have rules where is the transfer function part? How to change one thing into another?
Yeah. In this current stage, the transfer function is actually not represented in this model. So using this current prototype, it would be the burden would be on the analyst to write some sort of computer program that captures information about inputs and outputs informed by this analysis and this structure, and then to sort of derive a transformation function. I think the ideal would be that that is built into the software, but that does not currently exist in this model. Yeah, that's on the roadmap.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in this, I don't know how to describe. So the richness of the so the term substance comes up here, which presumably one would associate with constituents or components. Yes or no?
Not in this context. in this context, we are actually focusing on the nature of the flows between the components. So yeah, in this context, in this framework, essentially anytime we are talking about substances, we are actually talking about what is flowing between things. Are they messages? Is it a form of energy? Is it information? These are the types of substances that are being identified.
Philosophically, I'm confused.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I had not thought of it. Yeah.
I think so far this thing is a detailed descriptive tool.
Yeah.
Description only so far.
Yes.
No magic yet.
Yes, exactly. Really just the descriptive part. Jerry, I'm curious, what is the source of your confusion? Is it
my mind?
Yeah, do you not see the flow of water through a pipe as a substance? With water being substance?
Actually, it goes back to Aristotelian notion of substance.
Okay.
And the four basic origins of causality.
Right.
So that if you choose to call energy as a substance, then it's no longer tangible.
Ik heb de foto's opgestuurd.
Sorry, what was that?
Did somebody something?
Yeah, it sounded like Gerard, I think.
Sorry, no, I was saying something here in my house. I didn't realize I had my microphone on.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So, no, if you, substance has a long history in philosophical context. And it's usually associated, for example, the science of chemistry could be restricted to the notion of substances.
Right. Yeah.
And other abstract notions that you mentioned would not have this tangibility, and that's what confused me.
Got it. That is great feedback. I think that there's a lot of room for maybe different terminology to be used in different aspects of this framework. And so it's actually exciting to get that feedback, because my sort of imagined future state where this is an open source project is you basically send me a message saying, like, Shingai, this usage of the term substance throws me off. And then I get to take it in and think about how I might reconcile it if I decide that it does make sense to change it. So when I hear you point that out, I feel very curious about where there is room to improve and make things more clear. Thank you.
Can I say something? I think the same place I got also stuck with when I was trying to explain it to Jerry, the concept of open system. Afterwards, because of the question he asked me, I had to think quite a lot. And can you all hear me now? Can you okay? Okay.
Yes.
So what I want to say is, see, you are trying to model a system, but what is a system? System can be an information system, or a material system, or an energy transformation system, which is a structure or a function or an information system. So when we say substance here, then it depends on what system we're talking about. If it's an information system, the substance that is being transferred across is information, right? It has no units. Whereas if it is matter, then we are talking about mass. Whereas if you're talking about function, then it is doing an energy transfer, and we are talking about coulombs of energy. So this, but in general, a living system has all three, right? I'm made up of matter, and I exchange energy, I absorb and transmit energy, and I also have a capability to abstract the whole thing and communicate everything strictly as information. I mean, the physical transfer happens through matter and energy, but what is being discussed is information. So the substance is a very generic term, because the system itself is a very generic word. That this is the way I should have explained to Jerry when I gave that matrix model.
Yeah, I think for me, I guess for me, the point is that we want to be able to look at living systems, to look at social systems, or I should say, part of what excites me, maybe not the point is, but these living systems, these social systems, like corporations, like these complex blockchain networks that I'm looking at, where the reality is that their behavior can only be understood as interactions between humans and computer code and power systems and power grids. And the tendency is to only look at one aspect of it. For some people, Bitcoin is code, Bitcoin is a currency, Bitcoin is this, Bitcoin is that, when really it is this complex, evolving thing that only exists because humans are interacting with each other over the internet in a manner that is constrained by software encoded rules. So you have to look at the interactions between information and matter and energy, or else you can't see the big picture.
Right.
Yeah.
There are three different phases of the same system, three different attributes or whatever it is, information, matter, and energy. You need to look at all three transfers.
Yes, absolutely. You said that with information, did you say there are no units? What was the comment you made about units and information?
Yeah. In information, I mean, how could you quantitatively, how do you measure it? I mean, you can't weigh it.
I'm thinking about the notion of Shannon information and Shannon entropy, Shannon information, information theoretical measurements.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, that was it. Just information theoretical element.
Shannon information, the more I think about it, he is not talking about communication through a language format. He is talking about the intermediate translator interface, which takes some form of energy and converts it into an abstract notion. Basically, how do we go through bits, bytes, and words, and how can the encoding, decoding system do? So the Shannon descriptions are only at the intermediate stage, which in the brain I call it the neuron language, where we have phoneme, syllables, and words. The same thing, bits, bytes, and words. So, but that is a translation. It's not a communication.
Yes. I
don't know. Do you follow me? Do I?
I do. I agree completely. No,
I don't.
Oh. Please, Jerry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You explain it. Go ahead, Shingai.
Okay. Well, I mean, I was just going to say that in my system science program, we read a lot of Shannon's work, the papers from the Macy's conferences in the 1950s, and Shannon was very explicit about how he wanted his ideas to be used, or they were intended to be used in a very specific context around communications over these electronic channels. And he cautioned against extending his notion of information to all these areas that he did not think they would actually apply. And when he saw people trying to apply it to all these things, he was very skeptical. And he acknowledged that it does not relate to semantics or meaning. So I'm very sympathetic to the view that Shannon information is something that it means Shannon information, not information as we understand it in broad usage. So it's limited.
So I understand your explanation. The problem that I see is the notion of a transfer function and the relationship. Because of your invoking basically set theory as a background mathematics, Shannon information is therefore yes or no. Bits must be up or down from a quantum perspective.
Right.
And the consequence of this is you only have Boolean algebras. And this limitation to Boolean algebras is very severe in terms of transfer functions. Particularly if you're thinking of any sort of nonlinear system, such as life.
Right.
And so that the energy difficulty of expressing the three basics here of energy, matter, and information is how do you do this all within the same Boolean algebra?
You create symbols. That is, you have to, no, I'm serious. You have to non-dimensionalize the whole thing, because energy comes in so many different forms, right? And matter comes in so many different sizes. So you have to kind of non-dimensionalize, and that is the beauty of brain. It creates pulses. So once you create it into pulse processing, and how you pack these pulses, that is where the Shannon's theorems and all those things comes in. That is how this is what I did working on disk drive for 30 years. Okay, so this is what the Shannon's law, capacity constraint, and all the things applies only in how do you transfer information, matter, energy into a certain non-dimensional form, which is actually pulse sequences. Digital signal processing is what he worked on, but what the digital signals conveyed is not his domain.
Ram, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. That adds great clarity to your work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You know, after working on disk drive for so many years, suddenly I realized, oh, what the heck I've been doing? This is what it is. Now, when you say 0 and 1, I think of it in magnetic recording, whether North Pole, South Pole, or a bit standing up or down, perpendicular recording, longitudinal recording, you know, everything essentially just to get to a binary. That is the beauty of the brain. Once it converts it into binary language, zeros and one, a spike or no spike. Now the rest of it is all pulse processing, and then the mind, what it does is assigns labels, which is what, in a sense, you are putting in your data structure here labels, and once it gives labels, then it's all pattern recognition, label manipulation, and those kind of things. That's what the higher level cortex does. The body takes raw energy, converts it into pulses, and in between, the pulses are nicely packed into bits, bytes, and words. And that's what the midbrain does, prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. But once it goes beyond that into the Wernicke area, now you have given it labels. Oh, this is Shingai, this is my computer, this is that, and all those things. Then you can start playing with, I don't know, maybe that's what I think of categories. You can start playing with those things. So that is why the brain first part is to categorize and then classify. That's what the brain does. One is a differentiation, the other one is an integration. You take a lot of raw data and you differentiate and you pick out things that are kind of similar looking. That is categorization. Then you classify some of them into an object, and then object recognition. You do fooling around with it. So that is done by the higher level. The lower level brings in the raw data. So once you think about it that way, the midbrain is where all this bits and bytes happen. That's where the Bitcoin is made. And the blockchain is your higher order brain, where it is concurrently processed. That is the key point. It is not concentric. It's not one after. I think of it as Matryoshka dolls that go one into the other. That is how the brain is stacked. If I explode the brain, it'll just keep growing like that.
Wow, fascinating.
Now, Shingai, if you could give us some future vision of this BERT modeling methodology, I mean, after fully development, what it would look like and what it can do for us in the real world situations to help.
Okay. Yep, I can do that. I would like to just give a quick demonstration of the graphical user interface before going into that, because I think it could help, so you can see what it looks like in its current stage. So, share. Okay. So this is what you are met with when you first open the prototype. Can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then I go here and I open, this is the JSON file, JSON file that we were just looking at. Then I open it, and here I have the model that I have created through the process of analysis. I will give a very quick overview. So if you think about what Bitcoin does and what users ultimately want from it, they are confirmed transactions. And these confirmed transactions live in the blocks on the blockchain. So they are a type of message, and there are various parameters that you can use to measure them, transactions per block, transaction throughput, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the one thing that everyone can agree that Bitcoin does empirically, is that transactions are confirmed going to a set of users, which are the environment, and there are different types of users. If we come over to this side and look at the main input, we actually have transaction requests. So users use a software wallet interface to send transaction requests. And it is only through the complex interaction of software, hardware, humans interacting through these various feedback loops, all of which can be directly measured, observed, and recorded, that a transaction can actually be confirmed on the other side. It is very possible for a user to request a transaction and have it be denied by the system. You have contributors that are contributing source code or code proposals into this development subsystem. And development subsystem lives inside because these are the small set of users who have the power to change the protocol. The rules that Bitcoin operates by, they don't change often, and they don't make big changes, but they can be changed. If somehow some group of users were going to say, we want to eliminate the supply cap on the amount of Bitcoin that can be created, from a social perspective, this could happen, although people would probably stop using it if that were to happen, which is where the social complexity comes into play. And then we also have electricity as an important inflow. And Cambridge University has a Center for Blockchain Research, where they, using an open and rigorous methodology, give really great estimates for the amount of electricity being consumed by the Bitcoin network. So that's another thing that we can measure and see how it relates to everything. So this is the current state of BERT. It is, as Jason said, really a tool for description and approaching the analysis of complex systems in a structured way. And the methodology outlined in the book does guide you through this process step by step of identifying the outputs, identifying the inputs, identifying the interfaces, and then gradually decomposing.
Okay. What are the other two pink circles?
The other two pink circles.
The one on the two on the right, lower right part of this
top system.
Okay, so these two subsystems at the bottom, correct? Here and here.
Yeah.
No, the one on the left you said was the electrical usage, or associated with Cambridge's blockchain research. Was electricity. Okay, you have that. So now the one immediately to its right.
Yep.
What I can't see the label there.
Yeah. So I have a heat dissipation interface, and I have heat as a outflow. And this is essentially the Bitcoin miners, and they're like large data centers. They are generating massive amounts of heat waste.
Okay. So it's a physical constraint or physical descriptor.
Yes.
That's not directly related to the calculations of interest.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah, I think it's important to note that the electrical component is necessary for the system, but for the purposes of this analysis, I've chosen not to deeply decompose the energetic electrical aspects at this time.
So I'm just trying to put this operational aspects of the user interface into context, which is here very grounded in electrical circuits that make decisions, basically. So how would that relate to general cybernetic systems?
Sorry, how would what relate to general cybernetic systems?
Well, you have energy flow, and you have transfer of information, and you have a defined function or purpose, goal, final cause, whatever you want to call it. And but how would you take this side of this part of things and put it in a real world situation, like how do you manufacture an automobile or some such thing like that, where the material inputs would be rather different from electricity.
Right. Interesting. So how would you put this in a real world scenario?
Let me add to Jerry's suggestion.
Please.
So far you used the Bitcoin case. But Bitcoin case still, in my opinion, belongs to a tiny bit of small section of population, but people with those high IQ guys and high IT guys can digest. I would recommend or challenge you to do a daily case. For example, I was thinking it's a very interesting high-profile example of California wildfire. Just happened, right? It's very dramatic. Wildfire gets so seriously damaging people because there was no enough water. And why there is no enough water? Because they had put in some kind of environmental law that prevents water free flowing as naturally as possible. I mean, because this thing is so hot in social media, because the law is because if they do that water thing, some kind of a fish is not going to happy or something like that. I'm not sure how accurate my story is, but you can check over the news and the social media. But eventually they got stuck there, and eventually Trump had to interfere as a system interfere. Trump had declared some kind of emergency and sending some troops to open the water pathway so that the water gets into California, kind of a sort of so the whole story is a system interaction. And your system observation, I mean, the description is observation. And you always need to eventually link it to system intervention. Now, how do you intervene? And in a little story I tell, the intervention has to be done by Trump and by using some military to do that water, to open that water for them. So that's too funny. And but very interesting if you could use your model to capture that story. And you will have a huge audience to try to learn this model.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's cool because as I mentioned, most of my career has been in crypto and blockchain. And so as I've been trying to understand George's material and apply it, I felt constrained in that I could only see how to apply it to the area where I had developed domain expertise. But I'm most excited about applying it to all sorts of other areas. I think blockchain researchers will be interested in using this to think more rigorously about the interactions between the technical economic and human aspects of the systems they are designing and building simulations informed by that, but that is a very small segment of the population. So I have a whole bunch of other models here that I've started to build. I'm not very proud of any of them because they're just me. Sorry, go ahead. Which one?
Fast food. You're currently in
fast food. Okay, fast food. Yeah, fast food. Okay,
that everybody understands.
Yeah. Okay, fast food. Okay, so we have prepared food items as the key output going to customers as a source. And we have a customer service interface. So this is the primary product output. We come over to one key input. We have utility providers, which are inputting operating energy through a utility management interface. And we have the labor market inputting labor through a workforce management interface, which interfaces with this human resources subsystem. And then we have food suppliers, which provide raw food ingredients through a supply chain interface, interfacing with this inventory management subsystem. And then all of these subsystems, human resources, facilities management, and inventory management, all send flows into the food service operations subsystem, which delivers the final product to consumers. And then we have a waste processing thing over here.
And the one in the lower right again, I can't read.
Yep, this is waste processing.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, so food and packaging waste going out. Yeah. Yeah, I have a friend who, she comes from a background in complexity science. Her mother is an architect who applies complexity science in her work. And my friend is a complexity science philosopher, and she helped me build this model. She also is very encouraging me to focus on easy, simple to understand models that demonstrate practical use cases. So she helps me build this. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The box that you have here is the food service operations.
Yep.
Do you consider that as the heart of your system? Is that the system under study? Define what is the system, what is the environment? What is the system, what is the environment in this diagram? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, I will come up with it on the spot. So the system of interest is the US fast food industry as a whole. The environment I would define as the United States political economy, or the United States economy, if you want it to be simpler. But the United States political, economic, social system would be the environment.
Yeah, I think you're mixing up many scales here. That's probably what makes it too complicated.
I agree.
I'm sorry. I don't mean it in a negative sense.
No,
what
I agree
I'm trying
with you.
to say is, see, I'm a brain bigot, and look at it this way. See, if you think about, for example, the energy, and think of it as one neuron, the energy input is being handled by the mitochondria inside the cell. Just think, not a neuron, just a cell, one cell, let us pick it up. So are we going to, if I model it as the cellular level or a self level or a society level, I need to make sure that I restrict my modeling size. If I just stick to a cell size, then the energy is the mitochondria. The waste management is a system that removes all the dead cells and the dead portion and does the scavenging work. Okay. And then there are the functional aspects of it. There are some receptors that are bringing in and making it the cell-specific activity. In this case, if it is the Bitcoin mining, the computer that's running the Bitcoin mining, you can consider that as the function. So what I'm saying is the blob that you have here called the food service operations, that actually is the system under study. And that all these other things are necessary evils that need to go inside that system. You need energy, you need waste management, okay, and you need immune system, you need circulatory system, oxygen system, all those things, right? So everything should go into that cell. So you have to now define, am I modeling this at cellular level or an organism level or at a society level? Depending on that, the variables that you're going to deal with become very different. The
Absolutely.
size and other things. But the process of modeling is invariant. And that is what I'm trying to say in the open system model. It doesn't matter whether I'm talking about self, or society. How a system under study interacts with the environment is a general systems theory.
Right, right.
But when you go into the guts of it and when you try to apply it, now scale is important, because otherwise, I mean, you'll be going from quantum to cosmos. You can't do it.
Yeah,
You don't. You don't have a resolution. The time step that you're taking, it better be microseconds or light years. You can't have both in the same model.
Oh, interesting.
Well,
can you have both
your
in the
analysis
same
will never
model?
converge, right? You don't
What's
have
that?
your analysis will never converge. You don't have the tolerance. A tolerance is always a small fraction of these some system parameter that you're looking at. So if you make the whole thing so big, you don't have tolerance. You'll never have convergence. You'll never close the system under study inside working. You will never be able to do it, and you'll be just stuck in spinning wheels. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
Well, ma'am, I could argue another side of that, but it would be more on the mathematical side of things, and not directly related to this presentation. But the idea you're presenting, Ram, if I applied it to this diagram, I would say, well, what's missing from this is the balance sheet, the profit loss statement. Fine. I mean, this is very commonsensical, easy to understand. Even cyberneticians can understand it. Excuse me, excuse me. But it's very direct and straightforward. Okay, and it's solid. The logic of it is solid if you look at it only in the context of these relationships. But in that United States economic environment, there's something called a profit loss. And the system will survive only if it makes profits. And so I don't see that profit loss sort of thing in there, nor do I see the timing to operate a restaurant. Fast food is simpler because everything is frozen, basically. But to operate a restaurant requires an enormous amount of timing, of keeping fresh food coming in and keeping employees employed. And these are the difficult parts of the system in operating a restaurant, are the timing of all these events. And I don't see that time connection, which was listed in one of the initial criteria, involved with this diagram.
Yeah. These are all really good points. It's like these are all great ideas for things to incorporate. I think one thing that's coming up for me that I think is maybe could be seen as a limitation or an advantage, but I actually have not been thinking much about interventions in systems. I've been thinking about, can I actually develop anticipatory capabilities about complex systems where I already have a strong intuitive capacity? So Bitcoin, the US political system, I have a lot of confidence in my intuitive ability to anticipate and predict what might happen in these systems. That is better than most people, but can I augment that with this form of analysis to develop anticipatory capacities that surpass my intuitive capabilities? So again, I think I've been very narrowly focused in a way that has blinded me to a lot of these very practical things that you were speaking to, which are all things that I think should be included in future versions of this tool. And I think George probably imagines that they would be included.
Just another quick comment. Another thing that seems to be missing is feedback loops.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Kind of need for a system to make sure it has any stability.
Yeah. Did you see them in the Bitcoin example? There were feedback loops there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were there, just not in
Okay.
this one.
Yeah, I asked Claude to build me a example model, and Claude built this, and then I left it as a template. So I did not actually deeply do the analysis process. I was just like, Claude, help me brainstorm what this might look like. And Claude AI actually generated this JSON file for me. Yeah.
Okay, so the other question is anticipation.
Yeah.
Are you using this in the sense of anticipatory systems that's been developed by Robert Rosen and others, or not? I mean, there's a rich literature on anticipatory systems. It's quite controversial. Some of it is, well, it's
off the line.
at the forefront of if you want to make predictions about health and disease states, you need to anticipate what's going to be the consequences of drinking too much alcohol, for example. So the anticipation here and how it fits into these schemes is a crucial issue of how you're using that word.
Sorry, my computer ran out of battery.
Oh, it changed to mobile phone. So that's a system errors.
Okay, that says how you're using anticipation.
Exactly. What were you saying? Anticipation, Jerry?
We haven't heard anything from Gerald. Gerald, Heiner, are you there? Yes, say something.
Oh, Heiner's here. Good to see you, Heiner.
You want to make a test if I can speak?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I can. I enjoy the conversation. Sorry if I have my video off most of the time, but I try to be busy besides. No, I didn't hear from Gerard, but I just shared with Yanis. I'm very much thinking about going to Birmingham because I feel many of the things Yanis has in mind for 2026 needs to be carved out already in Birmingham. I like the deep conversation, asking the deep questions like, is meaning just between two people, or is there shared meaning? Is there meaning in a certain, how do you say, bubble? And all these questions are very dear to me. I love these sessions with Gerard and Jerry, and especially the discussions with the deep knowledge of Sashandri makes me curious. So I try to find out who the peoples are. But as a bottom line, next time you get 7 girls coming here. So maybe we can widen the agenda.
Okay. Thank you. Gerard.
Jerry, I was curious to hear the question or the point you were making about anticipation, since I cut off for a moment.
Oh, well, a system scientist by the name of Robert Rosen,
Yep.
okay, developed his notion of anticipatory systems. And this has received wide publicity and research by some very notable mathematicians and system scientists on the grounds that Rosen claims that mathematics as it's normally, or physics, his claim is with regard to physics, that physics as it exists cannot anticipate biology.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Anticipate biology. That's his assertion.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? I didn't understand. Physics, well,
what? So the notion of anticipation is something about the future and the future tense. if you're talking linguistically, it's the future tense is what you're anticipating. And that's associated with the notion of final cause. And so Rosen's conclusions are very strong. And he, by the way, grounds this in category theory. He concludes that you cannot use physical models to come to anticipated conclusions. There is a failure of physics in its mathematics that will generate anticipated consequences. And therefore, he claims biology is outside of physics. That's his assertion. And this has to do with the concentric circles that you mentioned and other aspects. But so my question to you, Shingai, was how are you using the term anticipation in a general generic sense or in the very specific technical sense that Robert Rosen used? And the other person, well, there's several persons of interest, but Daniel Dubois at Liège, University of Liège in Belgium, has written extensively about this and published extensively about it, and even has, I don't know, 8 or 10 conferences on anticipatory systems. And so it's a loaded, what I'm trying to say is this is a loaded word.
Right. It's a wonderful question. I appreciate it because I actually, there's a pair of scientists, engineers at the ISSS, Janet and Michael Singer. I don't know if you've interacted with them, but they are friends with Judith Rosen, Robert's daughter, and they encouraged me to start reading Robert Rosen's work. So I do have several of his books. I've started reading his papers, and everything that I can understand about the philosophical points that he's making, I strongly agree with. But I find his use of category theory to be very intimidating, and I simply have not had the time to deeply understand his anticipatory systems model and approach. So I actually talked with Judith a few weeks ago. It was a great conversation, and I wish that I had more time or some sort of collaborator who understood his work deeply, because I intuitively feel that his concepts should be integrated into the work that I'm doing. I know that George Mobis, he was inspired by Robert Rosen's work when he was working on robots back in the 90s. He used anticipatory systems notions for his robotics work, and he has a generic model of an agent in the textbook, and that makes heavy use of the notion of anticipation. So when I was using the term, I was using it in a very loose, conventional, non-scientific term, but I'm highly curious about getting into Rosen's work and being able to incorporate it in some useful way.
Well, I would just add that I had several conversations with Robert Rosen, and these were fairly deep conversations in the sense of the several hours of conversation about the relationship between chemistry and his notion of anticipation. He was not, in his written work, he really rejects chemistry as well as physics from anticipation.
Yeah.
And I tend to disagree with that pretty strongly. For reasons which are obvious for someone trained as a biochemist, okay? But the issue here becomes, it becomes prediction of the future from the records of the past.
Right.
That's what I want. That's where I wanted to go. But I'd like to avoid the word prediction. It is actually a recall of memory of the immediate next step that you're expecting. I'll give you an example. You're listening to a song that you know very well, but somebody else is singing. Your mind it already knows what the next note is going to be, and that is coming as the feedback from the memory. But if the person singing, if they actually don't sing that note, sometimes you won't even know because you are humming already along with it and you move along thinking that the note was sung. This is real effect, and I can give you some auditory samples examples. So this is where the concept of anticipation comes, but it is really like one step at a time. It is coming back through the memory, and this is the concept of attractor dynamics that you don't get in. I presume you won't get it in just a simple feed-forward physics model, right? Because anytime there is a sensation coming in, you're expecting a certain action. That is, you heard one note and you're now ready with already the next note. That feedback is coming into it. And even if you don't hear it, it goes through a system and you feel you heard it and you move on. So in a sense, you have it in your model, Shingai, when you talked about, that's why I was asking you about the definition of memory. That H term that you have, and then your model includes both feed forward and feedback the moment you say, I have memory in it. Right? But you go, and then the fact that you included delta T, you are now looking at one step at a time. So at every step, you are looking at what is the, based on the past knowledge, what should be the next step that is already triggered.
Yeah.
And you evoke it, and if that agrees with they're actually not just the action, but the anticipated sensation, both of them coming. That's why you actually evoke a reflex. So you already, in your mind, in your ear, even the basilar membrane, everything is set up, you are already hearing tuned for that note. And even if you don't hear it, just the random oscillation will evoke that note and you hear it and you go on. That is where the anticipation comes. And I'm not sure, I don't know how to apply it to physics and chemistry. I never thought about it. But what in living systems with feedback control, and that's where the whole concept of cybernetics comes, right? It is really reciprocal control and communication. So communication going forward and control is coming back. And the control is a signal that can just fill up with a next expected communication, and you can just keep closing the loop and keep going. So you're listening to a song and then you just continue and you can keep humming. You don't need the singer, the other person to sing anymore.
Let me jump in.
Please.
I find this very, very interesting because it has about rhythms and resonance. And we in the Indian Embassy, I was Tagore Einstein Council and Foundation, we look very much in music and fusion. So we come from natural and biological systems to social and cultural systems. And there we encounter so many language barriers you prominently raised before, like Levi-Strauss saying, I founded structuralism, but I'm also a humanist because all these communities clash because he cannot be a humanist if he is a structuralist. So in a nutshell, we discussed with Charles François, mentioning all these names, with Herbert Stachowiak, general model theory, do we need both systems and models? I think I mentioned it earlier, but for me, we have to widen the solution space because the problem space keeps us in our certain vocabularies. And the discussions...
Very well said.
And the discussions with Stachowiak and Charles François were of the foundations of holism, because it's not only Arthur Koestler. He was young Christian Smuts. He was a bioecologist, he was a statesman, he was a general, and he's been really stoned because he was South African and it was difficult war times. But if you go back what he studied, like on termites and seaweed, then you see these people had some knowledge, even with our modern Western scientific verbiage. But I find this group very, very good on going beyond the sectarianisms of science and really ask the difficult, simple questions.
Gerald, we cannot finish without your comment or your disagreement.
Well, I usually wait when people explain their approach to modeling, because in my preference, it's better to start modeling with a small number of variables so you can actually identify the major relationships, and then later on you can specify. And one of the things that when you have only a few variables is immediately clear, it's the role of choice, which has been missing in the discussion today. So I'm still waiting for it.
Let me just interject one word. Stachowiak started his general model theory in 1958, and he didn't speak about mathematical models, even when he was very much in logics and sign systems and symbol systems. He speaks like we use it in other languages, not in English, like Gestalt. It is not design. It is embodied, it's immersive, it's plastic, it's dynamic. He speaks as humans, as model-making animals. I know that in English we only talk about simulation and mathematical models, and I have not found a solution yet how to say what I mean models are in English.
Well, to me, most models have a function, which means that I consider them as an instruction rather than as a description. And that makes a very great change in the way you think about things. I don't think that in the area where individuals and organisms are involved, you can do without the notion of freedom and choice. So
the part of the issue of freedom and choice from a systems perspective is what is the delta T of which you're concerned about? Are you concerned about the delta T of microseconds, milliseconds, seconds, minutes, hours, days? These all have a different form, if you would, of concentricity of the levels of duration of the anticipation. So that if you want to anticipate as the brain anticipates, you're talking really in the microseconds, at least, or probably femtoseconds, because we're talking about enzymatic processes, chemical relations in the femtoseconds. But if you want to go to longer periods of time, I think in the people looking out the train window, they say it's about 2 milliseconds for the brain to process the scenes going by on the train. So that's the scale at which I understand RAM to be operating on with his frequency analysis. But then once you go beyond this, how do you compose longer frequencies, longer durations on which your function is actually your choice, your freedom of choice exists? That's my understanding of the relationships involved with cybernetics, but that's just my perspective of it. So if you want to, perhaps to put this into a biological context, think of the development of an embryo, human embryo, over 9 months. And that is anticipated by the genetic system, obviously. And then future development of the human body in over 15 years or so before it becomes a relatively stable system. And that there's constraints on all of these freedoms of choice along the way. It's not, you're not guaranteed just because you make love that you're going to have a super genius child that's going to result from it, and that long anticipation that is involved. So the freedoms of choice have become,
one of the things
a deep part of the discussion.
No. One of the things that is important in thinking about what it is that actually creates the possibility of freedom of choice is, of course, that you require some coherence. So, for example, if you say to somebody, be alert, what is the DT, the delta T? It can be anything, but it does provide coherence to all the different changes that you are considering.
Very well said. But this is part of in a certain sense, the essence of cybernetics, in the sense that this is why Wiener developed his mathematics that included both discrete and continuous functions in order to anticipate when the airplane would meet the trajectory from the bullet fired from the anti-aircraft gun. That was the purpose of him doing this sort of mathematics. Right, Ram?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. You have to work at multiple scales. Yeah.
That example is in his books. It's one of his books. But the issue, to my mind, has always been, okay, suppose I want to shoot down a German plane. Can I use systems? Can I use cybernetics? My main problem in that case is that I have to assume that the pilot has a freedom of choice, that he can actually try to evade. So what I only can do is actually shoot in such a way that I constrain the pilot in his freedom so that I can actually, by that, predict where he will be. So what you do is you shoot in one place and then you continue as if you are stupid, and then you hope that the pilot will think you are stupid and will not change, and then you have him.
As usual, Gerard, you are very precise in your language.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. Sorry. Can you rephrase it, please?
Well, what is it that you didn't understand? Because the example of the shooting, or
example of shooting. What is the point you're trying to make? I didn't get the gist of it.
Well, I can explain if there's time.
Should I explain it?
Yeah, Jerry.
It's actually
so, Ram, it's really quite simple. You have a plane on a given trajectory.
Yeah.
You can observe this from the ground.
Right.
And now you want to anticipate where you also know at the altitude he's flying. Okay, and so you can anticipate how long it will take shells from the gun to get to the airplane. Okay,
right.
But this is not going to be an exact calculation in the usual sense. And so Gerard's point of view is simply, if the pilot of the plane is coherent, he will see shells coming towards him and he'll take evasive moves. And so that time delay between when the shells are fired and the options that the pilot has is what Gerard was referring to as, don't be a stupid pilot. Don't fly into the shells, fly around them.
Yeah, but that is why people developed heat-sinking missiles. You can't evade it.
Well,
see, that's the idea of whole.
But that's a modern development, Ram. That's a modern development of technology that's very powerful and very useful.
Yes.
Okay. But that's not where Norbert Wiener was coming from. And that's not where the philosophy of anticipatory systems comes in. Although I do see from the heat-seeking part, it is part of an
It is anticipatory.
Sorry,
right?
I do want to jump in just because I do have to leave at the hour. I'm sorry, I am enjoying the conversation. So I'm just gonna like wrap up with some of my thoughts on the future of this thing.
And also the future vision.
Yes, the future vision, exactly. Okay, so in the short term, the priorities that I've identified are more model systems. So looking at neurons, looking at organizations and corporations, just more examples of systems for people to relate to. There's going to be a formal specification. So moving from the JSON to an XML specification. Dynamic modeling and simulation. So like the end objective really is like a dynamic tool that lives and is dynamic and allows you to simulate and is not just a static analysis toolbox. Want to create research papers and documentation to make the content accessible. And I would also say that integrating AI, probably in the form of large language models, at least to start, imagining like a chat bot or a chat box that is integrated into the tool to allow people to interact with the models with AI assistance. Those are the things that I've identified on the roadmap. I honestly feel like I'm going to need to let all of the feedback from this session sink in to update my vision. And yeah, thank you everyone for the feedback. It was yeah, an incredible learning experience. I guess I'll like make another comment on just my background coming from the social sciences. Basically everything that I learned in my program that was useful was in the realm of philosophy, and anything that attempted to do science to me felt not that interesting or useful, with the exception of basic statistical principles and techniques. But really, when I saw economists trying to do science with all of their calculus-based methods, I found it to be not helpful at all, and that my intuition of the economy was more powerful than any of the techniques that I learned in class. So I'm coming from a perspective where even just systems as a broad philosophical concept and some of these systems methodologies, to me, will allow political scientists and economists to iterate towards something that feels more like a science, because I think that right now they are attempting to mimic the natural and physical sciences, and I think they essentially need to start from scratch from a systems theoretic perspective. So I really appreciate interacting with natural sciences, biological scientists, neuroscientists, engineers, because I don't have that background. And the questions that you bring to me are, yeah, great for my mind and great for my imagination. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody. Laurie, you want to say something? No? Okay. So that's all for today. Thank you so much. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.